You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. This house, steeped in memory, held no welcome for me at this hour. 2 a.m, and the familiar hallway stretched before me, a shadowed stage for my restless pacing. Through Leo's partially open door drifted the rhythmic sigh of the ventilator, a constant reminder of why I stood sentinel in our childhood home. Mother needed respite, a breath between the suffocating waves of tending him, and I, the reluctant conscript, was her only relief. Leo's decline had been precipitous this past year. A cruel thief the physicians termed rapid onset neurodegeneration, clinical phrasing for the horrifying truth. My brother, barely 32, was being systematically unbound from his own body, the cause an elusive phantom. My phone flared, a harsh cerulean eye in the gloom. 2:07 a.m. 5 hours stretched ahead until the morning nurse's arrival, an eternity measured in the house's nocturnal creaks. My bare feet whispered across the polished hardwood towards the kitchen. Night rendered the house vast, hollowed out. Suburban quietude, thick and palpable, pressed against the window panes. The coffee machine began its low gurgle, a counterpoint to the silence as I brewed another pot, fuel for the vigil. Leo's breathing could falter, become erratic. Vigilance was paramount. Someone needed the clarity to adjust the BiPAP if the alarms remained silent. I sagged against the cool granite countertop, thumbs pressing into tired eye sockets. Then, slicing through the quiet, "Hey," Leo's voice, unmistakably, from the backyard. My hand froze against my face, pulse leaping beneath my fingertips. Impossible. Months had passed since Leo could muster more than a strained whisper, and walking was a forgotten memory. "Out here, need a hand." The voice again, stronger, insistent. My mouth turned to dust. Drawn to the kitchen window, I peered into the impenetrable dark of the backyard. The motion sensor floodlight remained dormant, signifying stillness. Just Mother's skeletal rose bushes and Father's old shed hulking in the gloom, unchanged anchors in a suddenly shifting reality. "Leo!" My own voice was a threadbare whisper, swallowed by the night. Only the chirr of crickets and the distant thrum of a neighbor's AC unit answered. I practically flew back towards Leo's room, socks skidding on the wood. The door groaned open under my push. There he lay, exactly as he should be, cocooned in the medical bed, the BiPAP mask a plastic carapace over his nose and mouth, his chest rising and falling with the machine's steady cadence. The digital display glowed with reassuringly normal numbers. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone, activating the flashlight. Its beam carved a stark cone through the oppressive darkness as I swept it through the house, a hurried inventory of emptiness. Living room, vacant, furniture draped in shadows. Father's defunct study, dust motes dancing in the light over silent relics. Guest bathroom, the rhythmic drip of the faucet Mother perpetually swore to fix. Back in the kitchen, coffee sloshed over the rim as I poured with unsteady hands, staining the counter. Exhaustion, surely. Nearly 20 hours awake. My mind was conjuring phantoms from fatigue. I took a scalding gulp of the bitter brew. In here now. Leo's voice, startlingly close, from the hallway directly behind me. The mug slipped, shattering on the tiles. Hot coffee splashed my shins, the sting lost in a wave of colder fear. Because that voice, it wasn't merely similar. It was him. The precise cadence, the faint echo of his university days accent, the voice the illness had stolen. "This isn't funny," I managed, addressing the vacant corridor, my voice fracturing. "Who's there?" Silence answered, profound and mocking. I snatched a knife from the block, the heavy chef's knife Mother favored. Sweat slicked my palm around the handle. Logic screamed prank, exhaustion, hallucination, but logic had ceded control to primal fear. The hallway yawned, dimly lit by the pale cerulean glow of a nightlight near the bathroom. A floorboard shrieked under my weight as I advanced, the sound amplifying in the stillness. "Check the closet?" The voice, nearer still, seemingly emanating from the alcove by the front door. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in my throat. My free hand slapped at the hall light switch. Click. Nothing. The bulb. Dead. Edging forward, spine pressed to the cool plaster wall, the knife felt absurdly inadequate. I reached the corner, inhaled sharply, and whipped my head around. Empty. The front door stood impassive. Deadbolt firmly slid home. Impenetrable. The coat closet yielded only the scent of mothballs and the clutter of bygone winters. A solid thump reverberated from the floor above, directly overhead. My muscles locked. Nobody should be upstairs. I hadn't ventured there. Leo's room, converted from Father's study, was ground floor now, a necessity born of his illness. Another thump, then the unmistakable cadence of footsteps crossing the upstairs landing. Retreating, my breath coming in ragged gasps, I slipped back into Leo's room. He remained oblivious, adrift in machine-assisted slumber. I pulled the door almost shut, the latch clicking softly, then fumbled for my phone again, fingers clumsy with dread. Who to call? The police? "Hello, officer. I think I'm hearing my severely disabled brother's voice, but he's asleep, and maybe someone's walking upstairs even though the house is locked." Insanity. More footsteps overhead, measured, deliberate. They halted directly above us. I flattened myself against the wall beside the door, knife held high. Sweat trickled down my spine, dampening my shirt. The house's central air conditioning roared to life, the sudden noise making me flinch violently. "Look at him," whispered Leo's voice, now inches away, just beyond the wood of the door. "So peaceful, isn't he?" My breath hitched. The doorknob began to rotate, slowly, with unnerving precision. I braced, knife poised to strike. The door swung inward. Nothing. The hallway stretched empty and silent. I remained frozen, a statue carved from fear, listening. Only the ventilators were, and the frantic percussion of my own breathing filled the void. Then, a new sound. Wet, dragging, slithering from the hallway, like saturated canvas pulled across the floorboards. It scraped closer. Flight screamed through my veins, but Leo lay helpless. Whatever lurked out there, I was his only shield. The dragging ceased, just outside the threshold. "Want to see what I really look like now?" The voice, still Leo's, but distorted, submerged, gurgling. something shifted in the Stygian darkness of the hall. A form, blacker than the ambient shadows, began to coalesce, to ascend. It was tall, impossibly tall, stretching, elongating towards the ceiling. I glimpsed a suggestion of a face, hideously malformed, proportions nightmarishly wrong. The scream that had been clawing its way up my throat finally tore free. I lunged, knife slashing wildly at the encroaching shape. My blade met only air. I stumbled forward into the empty hallway. The presence, the shape, had vanished. I slammed Leo's door shut, fumbled the lock, then threw my weight against his heavy oak dresser, shoving it across the floor until it wedged tight against the door frame. The wood groaned in protest, a deafening scrape in the charged silence, but barricading us felt paramount. My phone showed 2:43 a.m., 4 hours left, an abyss. I sank to the floor beside Leo's bed, the knife clutched to my chest like a talisman, and waited. The voice returned sporadically through the long, dark hours, a phantom echo calling from disparate corners of the house, sometimes Leo's, sometimes a warped parody. More footsteps pattered overhead, more dragging sounds whispered from the hall, but the barricade held. Whatever it was, it remained outside. When the nurse arrived punctually at 7, sunlight slanting weakly through the blinds, she found me slumped against the wall, the knife resting beside me. Her questions about the displaced dresser, the shattered mug, and dried coffee bloom in the kitchen met a mumbled evasion about a difficult night. What else was there to say? Leo had slept through the entire ordeal, peaceful, untouched. Upon waking, he was unchanged, the flicker of recognition in his eyes faint, his body captive, his voice a near-silent rasp. Later that morning, I called my mother. The lie about work's sudden demands felt flimsy, inadequate, but it was all I could offer. Disappointment colored her voice, but exhaustion made her understanding. Guilt gnawed, sharp and persistent, yet the thought of returning to that house, to the silence that wasn't empty, was unbearable, because I knew what I heard, what I saw. Something shares that house with Leo now, something that wears his voice like a stolen coat, something patient, waiting for the door to be left unguarded again. Sometimes, late, when the city quiet settles over my own apartment, my phone rings. The screen displays Leo's name, Leo's number. I never pick up. Leo cannot dial a phone. And I know with chilling certainty who is really calling. The instant the Polaroid ejected its square of nascent reality, a cold certainty gripped me. I'd trespassed somewhere I shouldn't have. Not the tranquil parlor I'd framed. Oh no. What swam into view was that selfsame room, yet ravaged, violated, its familiar walls marred by stains dark and visceral. A tremor traced my spine as I gaped at the impossible image. This, I sensed with sickening clarity, was merely the overture to a symphony of dread, a blurring fugue between the known, the now, and a future clawing its way back. My name is Elara. Skepticism was once my creed. The spectral belonged to flickering firesides, divination to dog-eared paperbacks. But conviction crumbles. It began the day I unearthed that peculiar camera from the dusty stratosphere of the house I occupied. I was tending the hearth for the Avertons, a charmingly antiquated pair, voyaging across oceans to mark 4 decades entwined. Their Victorian edifice, a labyrinth of inherited time, stood open to my curiosity. The attic air hung thick with the scent of dormant decades, cedar chests exhaling mothballs, fabrics sighing under shrouds, ghosts of photographs yellowing in forgotten albums. A time capsule cracked open, and there, perched on a precarious shelf amidst the slumbering relics, sat the Polaroid, incongruously pristine. Intrigue tugged. Heavier than expected, its cool, solid weight felt significant in my palm. An impulse, idle yet insistent, spurred me. Aiming through the attic's open maw towards the parlor below, I depressed the shutter. A mechanical rasp, a whirring sigh, and the small, stiff paper emerged. I fanned it gently, watching the chemical ghosts coalesce. Then the floor fell away from my world. The parlor materialized, yes, but through a distorted lens of violence. Furniture lay fractured, ornaments and volumes scattered like fallen soldiers, and those spatters sickeningly suggestive of shed life. My breath hitched. Trembling, I descended the narrow stairs, heart hammering against my ribs. Below, serenity reigned. The parlor stood immaculate, undisturbed, utterly defiant of the scene captured on film. I flicked my gaze between the photograph and the room, a chasm widening in my mind. This had to be illusion, fatigue playing tricks. I resolved to test the artifact again. The kitchen became my subject. Click, whir. The developing image showed not gleaming countertops, but inferno, flames devouring curtains, the stove a grotesque sculpture of heat-warped metal. Panic surged. Picture followed picture, each a fresh tableau of horror. The garden beyond choked with spectral weeds. The master suite's bed sagging beneath phantom decay. The front porch timber splintering into dust. The true depths of the abyss opened only when I turned the lens upon myself. A selfie. It spat out an image of me, yet not me. This Alara was etched with years I hadn't lived, hair silvered, face a roadmap of anxiety. And behind her, eclipsing the familiar backdrop, loomed a presence, indistinct but undeniably malevolent. A shadowy arm extending, fingers poised to grasp her shoulder. The camera slipped from my grasp, clattering against the floorboards as I recoiled, hitting the wall with a thud. A hoax? An impossibly cruel jest? No. A deeper, colder intuition insisted otherwise. This device wasn't malfunctioning. It was forecasting, projecting fragments of a future steeped in shadow. For uncounted hours, I remained huddled on the floor. The dreadful Polaroids fanned around me like tarot cards dealt by a malevolent hand. Were these immutable decrees of fate, or frantic warnings I might yet heed? As dusk bled through the windows, painting the rooms in hues of bruised purple, resolve hardened within me. If these were visions of what lay ahead, then inaction was complicity. I had to intervene. I began where the horror first manifested, the parlor. The photo depicted invasion, ruin. Thus, fortification became my obsession. Window latches tested, bolts thrown, heavy armchairs dragged to barricade the doors. Then, the kitchen. Appliances unplugged, the gas line severed at the source. Buckets brimful of water standing sentinel against the predicted blaze. Through the long night I toiled, a solitary soldier against encroaching entropy, pruning back the phantom overgrowth in the garden, probing the porch for nascent rot. Exhaustion gnawed, yet by dawn, a fragile sense of accomplishment flickered. Surely the timeline had been nudged. With hands that shook, I retrieved the camera. New exposures of each location. I held my breath, watching the images bloom. Bile rose in my throat. Identical scenes of devastation stared back. Nothing had altered. Despair, cold and absolute, washed through me. What use was foresight if the foreseen was inescapable? I nearly cast the cursed thing aside when a detail in the repeated selfie snagged my attention. The shadow figure remained, yes, but fractionally more distant, its grasp and hand suspended slightly further from my future self's shoulder. Hope, a desperate ember, rekindled. Not prevention, perhaps, but alteration. Minute shifts, accumulating significance. That had to be the path. The ensuing weeks dissolved into a fever dream of vigilance. The camera became an extension of my sight, or its pronouncements my gospel. I documented relentlessly, comparing new prints to old, searching for deviations measured in millimeters. Sleep became a luxury, my thoughts a frantic whirlwind of potential catastrophes and countermeasures. My obsession spilled beyond the Averton's property lines. Images foretold neighborhood blight, so I rallied neighbors for cleanup drives, anonymously tipped off municipal authorities about structural hazards, cajoled adjacent households into upgrading alarms and locks. Incrementally, painstakingly, the photographs began to concede. The destruction depicted lessened, the edges softened. In my self-portraits, the shadowy pursuer receded, growing fainter, its reach less imminent. Yet, in battling the projected future, the present slipped through my fingers like sand. Friends' calls went unanswered, meals forgotten, the rhythm of days lost to the metronome of fear. The house transformed into a meticulously arranged fortress, every object positioned with defensive intent, every waking second consumed by preemptive strikes against fate. Reality intruded with a worried call from the Avertons. Days of silence, punctuated by my increasingly erratic messages about securing the premises, had alarmed them. Their celebratory voyage was being cut short. They were returning. Ice water flooded my veins. Explanation was impossible. They would deem me mad. Perhaps I was mad. A new frenzy seized me, the frenzy of erasure. Furniture dragged back to its rightful place. Gardens hastily replanted where I'd defensively uprooted them. Every trace of my obsessive campaign frantically scrubbed away. Amidst this panicked restoration, I compulsively snapped more photos, desperate for visual confirmation of success. And then, one appeared. The parlor, pristine, ordered, precisely as it was before the camera's discovery. Relief surged, potent and brief, until my eyes snagged on a detail in the periphery. Tucked into a corner, almost subliminal, lingered a shadow, familiar and chilling, its hand outstretched. I spun around, my pulse a frantic drum against my throat. Framed in the doorway, no longer confined to film, stood the figure from my photos, sharper now, more substantial, and in its extended hand, I saw it. Another Polaroid camera, identical to mine. As it lifted the device, aimed it square at me, understanding struck with the force of a physical blow, cold and devastating. I hadn't been glimpsing the future. I'd been witnessing a closed loop, an Ouroboros of fear feeding obsession. The shadow wasn't an external threat. It was me. The me I was forging in this crucible of dread. The flash erupted, a blinding white nova. When my vision swam back into focus, the figure had vanished. On the polished floorboards where it had stood, lay a single, freshly developed Polaroid. Trembling, I stooped to retrieve it. The image showed me Ilara, as I was in that precise moment, standing amidst the scattered prophecies, camera clutched in my hand, my face a mask of dawning horror. And behind me, faint but unmistakable, hovered a shadowy figure, raising a camera. Clarity, sharp and painful, pierced the fog. I knew what must be done. Methodically, I gathered every photograph, every tangible piece of my descent. Carrying the camera and its terrible progeny, I ascended once more to the attic's dusty silence. I placed the Polaroid back on its shelf, nestled among the forgotten histories, exactly as I had found it. As my fingers released the cool plastic, an immense pressure lifted, as if I'd shed a heavy, invisible cloak. The future remained a vast, unwritten territory, and that knowledge was no longer terrifying, but liberating. Living under the tyranny of what might be had nearly consumed me, nearly solidified me into the phantom I feared. When the Avatons arrived the following day, they found their home undisturbed, their house-sitter offering a welcome that felt, finally, authentic. I spoke nothing of the camera, the visions, the spectral doppelganger. Some secrets are best left buried in the dust of attics. Occasionally, the memory surfaces, a fleeting question. Will another hand find it? Will the cycle perpetuate? But I push the thought away. The future isn't sculpted in stone. Each moment offers a chisel. The harshest lesson learned was this: grasping for control over tomorrow only imprisons you today. True freedom lies in accepting the unknown, in inhabiting the now. And if, in the quiet solitude of late hours, a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision suggests a familiar shadow, well, I simply permit myself a small, knowing smile and turn my gaze away. Some images are best left undeveloped. Sleep, that elusive phantom, had deserted me utterly, leaving me adrift on the porch swing near the witching hour, 2 a.m. by the indifferent glow of the kitchen clock. Seeking solace in the cool night air before another futile attempt at rest, my gaze wandered towards the familiar colonnade of trees defining my backyard's edge. Initially, a fragile calm settled over me, the night a velvet shroud. Then, disruption, a flicker of motion behind the lean, sentinel trunks, something that borrowed a human form but moved with unsettling celerity. An electric jolt shot through my core. My pulse became a frantic drum against the cage of my ribs, against the whispering counsel of fear, urging retreat and bolted doors. A contrary impulse compelled me forward, demanding a closer look. My dwelling is modest, anchored by a respectable plot of land, embraced on 3 sides by a sturdy timber fence, its rear boundary marked by a high, impassive brick wall. The porch, slightly elevated, grants a decent command of this nocturnal stage. Restless nights often find me here, a silent observer of nothing more dramatic than a furtive feline or a shuffling opossum. But this shadow, this silhouette limned by the sparse moonlight, was aberrant, erect yet hunched, like a figure burdened or predatory. Features remained cloaked in ambiguity, a mere suggestion of form against the deeper darkness. Rising from the swing, my hand instinctively closed around the cold cylinder of the torch, resting on a nearby wicker table. Descending the porch steps, each tread elicited a groan from the aged wood. The sound amplified, almost accusatory in the profound stillness. The air hung heavy, damp, slicking my palms against the torch's metal casing. I swept its beam across the familiar territory, the cone of light revealing only dew-kissed grass, scattered twigs, the mundane stones near the dilapidated shed. My own breath rasped, quickening despite my efforts at control. Hesitantly, I stepped onto the lawn, the chill seeping through the soles of my bare feet, raising gooseflesh along my arms. Left, right, the beam danced, my footfalls striving for silence on the yielding turf. My grip on the torch tightened, betraying a tremor that started deep within. Then, sharp and sudden, the snap of a brittle branch near the back boundary. I flinched, heart hammering now against my eardrums. The torch beam leaped towards the sound, and I followed, drawn inexorably forward. Dry leaves rustled and crumbled underfoot, tiny betrayals in the quiet. No words escaped my lips. Instinct dictated silence, lest I alert this unknown presence. Closer to the trees, the scent intensified. Damp wood, rich earth, the breath of the undisturbed night. Another faint crackle, closer this time. The sound of displacement among deadfall. I raised the torch higher, its light slicing through the darkness, illuminating bark and shadow, but revealing no movement. The bright circle on the ground felt small, insufficient, bordered by an impenetrable blackness. Tension coiled in my neck and shoulders. I realized I was holding my breath, waiting. After moments suspended in scanning the empty space, I stepped between two of the larger trees, directing the light downwards, searching for traces. The ground here was a patchwork of struggling grass and bare earth, and there they were, illuminated in the torchlight, stark against the damp soil. Footprints, unmistakably humanoid, bare, with the clear impress of toes and heel. They looked unnervingly fresh. Kneeling, my knees sinking into the cold, wet ground, I examined them more closely. Each print was substantial, perhaps the size of a large man's foot, 10 or 11 inches long. Their path led directly towards the impassive brick wall, but it was their depth that arrested me, imprinted with a pressure that spoke of unnatural weight or impossible force. I rose, a cold dread settling in my stomach, and began to follow the trail. With each step, the knot in my chest tightened. I fought to quell the frantic speculation, to focus only on the physical evidence, but my mind raced. A barefoot intruder in the dead of night. Why here? Why this silent, determined path to the wall? The prince guided me across the uneven ground, the grass flatter near the bricks, the trail momentarily fading before reappearing. A final, clear impression, stark against the base of the wall. And then, nothing. An abrupt cessation. No further marks led away, sideways, anywhere. It was as if the figure had ascended the sheer face, or simply dissolved into the night. I stood frozen, playing the torch beam up the height of the bricks. An escarpment, easily 8 feet, perhaps taller, daunting under the moon's weak gaze. No ladder leaned against it, no overhanging branch offered purchase. My eyes scoured the smooth, uniform surface, searching desperately for any irregularity, any conceivable handhold or foothold. Nothing. The sheer impossibility of it gnawed at me, my stomach twisting, my face flushing hot despite the night's chill. A fierce need to know, to see what lay beyond, warred with primal fear. My neighbor's property backed onto a narrow, neglected strip of land behind that wall, overgrown and leading eventually to distant woods. Were there prints on the other side? The thought of retrieving my short stepladder from the shed felt fraught with risk, crossing the dark yard, the noisy unlocking, the clumsy setup. Yet curiosity, sharp and insistent, won out. I turned and jogged back towards the shed near the yard's left flank, the torch beam bouncing erratically, my breath coming in ragged bursts against the silence. The shed door protested with a low groan as I wrestled it open, releasing the musty breath of dust and old paint. There in the corner stood the ladder. Snatching it, nearly upsetting a rake in my haste, I felt my pulse thrumming, my mouth parched. A paranoid glance over my shoulder revealed only familiar shadows, the house a dark bulk against the sky. Returning to the wall, I moved with attempted stealth, the aluminum ladder surprisingly cumbersome. I propped it against the bricks, testing its stability. It shifted slightly but seemed adequate. Placing the torch on the ground, angled upwards to illuminate the rungs, I began to climb, muscles taut, hands gripping tightly. The ladder creaked ominously with each upward step. Nearing the top, I clicked off the torch, hoping darkness would lend my eyes greater acuity. Peering cautiously over the summit, I surveyed the other side, a desolate ribbon of forgotten land, choked with tall grasses and random debris piles. Beyond lay only deeper shadow and the suggestion of woods. The faint moonlight revealed no obvious signs of passage, no crushed vegetation, no telltale impressions in the narrow space below. My arms began to shake, a combination of exertion and raw tension, my balance precarious. To cross over felt like madness. Alone, vulnerable, facing an unknown that could defy walls. No. Carefully, I descended, stepping back onto the grass, the wall looming beside me inscrutable. Those footprints, ending so starkly, so impossibly. The sequence replayed itself relentlessly behind my eyes. The silent approach, the inexplicable vanishing point. How does one scale sheer brick without aid, without sound? I swept the torch beam around the base of the wall again, desperate for a missed clue. A scuff mark, a dislodged stone, anything. Nothing. My body felt rigid, my skin prickling with the confusion that bordered on terror. The silence pressed in again, broken only by my own unsteady movements. A final, methodical circuit seemed necessary. I walked the perimeter, tracing the fence line, inspecting the wooden panels, the baseboards, all secure, undisturbed. Along the back wall again, left to right, the torchlight painting the bricks. Only those same baffling footprints remained, ending their journey at the impassive barrier. The right side of the yard, near the bushes and the house corner, yielded nothing but fallen leaves. By the time I regained the porch, exhaustion warred with adrenaline. My breathing was heavy, labored, as if I'd run a great distance. My shirt clung damply to my back. Sinking onto the top step, the torch resting heavy on my thigh, I stared out at the trees, half expecting the spectral figure to reappear. I listened, straining for any sound beyond the frantic thrumming in my own ears. Silence reigned. For 15 minutes or more, I sat sentinel, scanning the familiar space now imbued with profound strangeness. Gradually, my heart rate subsided, though a fine tremor persisted in my hands. The image of the footprints, their sudden terminus at the wall, imprinted itself on my mind. The quietness of the passage, punctuated only by those few snapping twigs, felt deeply wrong. A human presence, especially barefoot, should have announced itself more thoroughly. And the motive? A silent trek to an insurmountable wall, then dissolution? With conscious effort, I pushed myself up, went inside, and threw the deadbolt on the back door with a decisive click. A tour of the ground floor followed, checking windows, flipping lights on, and then quickly off again. A nervous ritual. I avoided the front windows, plagued by a sudden conviction of being watched. I found myself leaning against the kitchen counter, the torch still clutched in my hand like a talisman. Calling the authorities felt futile. What could I report? A fleeting shadow, footprints in the mud, no forced entry, no damage save trampled grass. The evidence felt too ephemeral, too bizarre. My phone lay inert on the table. The words wouldn't form. I poured a glass of water, the cold liquid shocking against my dry throat. A final compulsion drew me back to the porch doorway. The moon was now veiled by gathering clouds. The air had sharpened, carrying a distinct chill that made me shiver. The yard lay still, seemingly returned to its mundane state, yet irrevocably altered in my perception. My eyes fixed on the tree line, seeking movement, finding none. No leaves stirred unnaturally. After several more minutes steeped in watchful silence, I retreated inside for good, locking the door and, contrary to habit, leaving the porch light burning, a feeble beacon against the unknown. I drew the living room blinds tight, feeling the tension clench my jaw, tightening the muscles across my shoulders. Stretching, rolling my neck, brought no relief. The unease was a physical presence within me. I rode out the remaining hours of darkness, pacing the confines of my house, periodically drawn back to the rear windows, searching the gloom. The riddle of the footprints, the sheer physics-defying ascent of that wall, looped endlessly. Humanoid, yes, but the quiet, the effortless vanishing act. It felt orchestrated, mocking. As the first hints of dawn stained the eastern sky, around 5:15, I ventured out one last time, torch in hand. The prints remained, stark and clear in the pallid light. I followed them again, meticulously, seeking any overlooked detail, any subtle clue near the fence or wall. Nothing had changed. The wall stood solid, inviolate. No hidden gap, no rope, no disturbed mortar. Intact. Impossible. What stalked my yard that night remains an enigma, lodged like a shard of ice in my memory. The shape hinted at humanity, but its movement, its exit, defied natural law. Those tangible footprints, proof of presence, led only to an inexplicable absence. That night fundamentally shifted my relationship with this patch of earth. The porch swing still calls, sometimes, but the yard lights now blaze defiantly against the darkness, supplemented by a motion sensor near the trees. Meager defenses against a recurrence I cannot comprehend. No explanation satisfies. Only the visceral memory remains. The cold air, the damp ground, the footprints leading to nowhere, the silent, insurmountable wall, and the echo of a heartbeat that pounded like a drum against the profound, unsettling quiet of the night. Life continues, yes, but my gaze lingers longer now, more watchful whenever I step onto the porch after dark. The instant the percussion behind me detached itself from my own footfalls, a dissonant echo in the midnight air, I understood this solitary traverse was spiraling into a nocturne of dread. Retreat, however, was already a foreclosed possibility. I am by nature a creature of the obsidian hours, drawn to the city's hushed exhale after sundown. Hence the nocturnal runs, the avenues emptied, the atmosphere cooled, the day's clamorous industry dissolving into a serene thrum of far-off engines, and the rare, melancholic cry of an urban owl. This particular night offered no deviation, or so the illusion held. I cinched my laces, nested earbuds carrying a low melody, and stepped into the crisp autumnal embrace. A plenary moon presided, bathing sidewalks in elongated shadows, lending the mundane an ethereal, almost unsettling luminescence. My customary circuit commenced, angling toward the municipal gardens. Street lamps overhead flickered erratically, their intermittent glare inducing a stroboscopic dance that deceived the eye. Yet habit had dulled the effect. I barely registered it, absorbed in the metronome of my breathing, the steady rhythm of my soul's kissing asphalt. Only upon entering the park's perimeter did a subtle wrongness prickle my awareness. Usually desolate at this hour, barring a slumbering form on a bench or a stray dog walker navigating the gloom, tonight felt charged. The air itself seemed denser, vibrating with an unnameable tension. I dismissed the sensation. Pre-race anxieties, surely. A significant competition loomed, fraying my nerves for days. I accelerated, breath pluming rhythmically as I navigated the curve around the grand central fountain. And then I perceived it. Footfalls, fractionally unsynchronized with my own cadence. A glance thrown backward revealed nothing but the path unfurling into shadow and moonlight, utterly vacant. A frown creased my brow. I moderated my speed fractionally. The pursuing steps decelerated in tandem. My pulse, already brisk from exertion, leaped violently. Paranoia, I insisted internally, merely an acoustic trick or the mind's phantoms. But rounding the subsequent bend, the sound amplified, became undeniably distinct. Abruptly, I halted, pivoting to face my unseen follower. Emptiness greeted me. The path stretched behind, silent and stark. Only my own ragged exhalations and the city's distant drone disturbed the quiet. "Is someone there?" My voice, thin and fragile, dissipated into the park's vast stillness. No answer. I lingered, straining auditory senses for any betraying rustle. Nothing. Only the susurrus of leaves stirred by a gentle current of air, the remote yelp of a canine. Shaking my head, I turned, resuming my run. Instantly, the footfalls recommenced, faster now, imbued with urgency, as if their source, whatever it might be, was closing the distance. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. I erupted into a sprint, shoes hammering the pavement, desperation propelling me toward the park's egress. The pursuing rhythm quickened to match, swelling in volume with every frantic stride. Risking another backward look, my blood chilled. There, hovering at the periphery of vision, a tenebrous figure materialized. Too distant for features, yet its effortless mirroring of my pace was terrifyingly clear. I pushed harder, lungs searing, muscles protesting. Escape the park, regain the comparative sanctuary of illuminated streets. That was the imperative. Yet, irrespective of my velocity, the footsteps clung, never receding, never quite overtaking. As the park gates loomed, a sharp stitch bloomed in my side. stealing my momentum. The phantom tread drew nearer. I could hear respiration now, heavy and labored, not mine, emanating from directly behind. I burst through the gates onto the sidewalk, nearly cannoning into a startled couple walking their terrier. A breathless apology escaped me as I surged past, not daring to pause, not daring to look back. "Hey, are you all right?" The man's voice pursued me, but I was already dissolving down the block. Directionless flight ensued, weaving through a labyrinth of city streets, attempting to shed my pursuer. But the footsteps persisted, sometimes diminishing slightly, a deceptive lull, only to suddenly resonate terrifyingly close again. My thoughts raced alongside my feet. Who was this? What was their intent? No one suspicious had marked my departure. Had they lain in wait within the park? The notion unleashed a fresh wave of icy dread. I veered into a narrow alley, a shortcut gamble, a miscalculation. Deeper shadows lurked here, the towering edifices on either flank swallowing the meager moonlight. Midway, my foot caught, discarded refuse, a broken crate, impossible to discern, sending me sprawling. The impact was brutal. Rough asphalt flayed my palms and knees. For a disoriented moment, I lay gasping. Then I heard it. The footsteps, slow now, deliberate, entering the alley's maw. I scrambled upright, ignoring the stinging protest of my injuries. Turning to flee, horror dawned. A dead end. A high chain-link fence barred passage. The footsteps advanced. I spun, pressing my back against the cold mesh. "Who's there?" I yelled, projecting a bravado I didn't possess. "Back off! I've alerted the authorities." Silence answered. Only the steady, inexorable approach. My gaze darted frantically, seeking a makeshift defense. Amidst the detritus, a fractured length of pipe gleamed dully. I snatched it, brandishing it like a desperate sword. "Stay back!" I cried. "I mean it!" The footsteps ceased. A protracted silence hung heavy. Then, glacially, a figure coalesced from the gloom at the alley's entrance. My grip on the pipe became bone white as the form drifted closer. The dimness obscured all detail. It remained a silhouette, tall and ominous. It halted mere feet away, near enough that I could discern its breathing, slow, even, utterly unperturbed by any chase. "What is it you want?" I managed, my voice betraying me with a tremor. The figure inclined its head, an almost quizzical gesture. Then stunningly, it spoke. "I want you to wake up, Elara." I blinked, adrift in confusion. "What?" "Wake up," it reiterated, the voice now strangely, disturbingly familiar. "You're caught in a nightmare." Abruptly, the alley's gritty reality began to waver, dissolving at the edges. The figure before me seemed to shrink, its menace receding. A hand rested on my shoulder, shaking gently. "Elara, darling, wake up. It's a bad dream." My eyes flew open with a sharp intake of breath. I bolted upright in bed. Leo sat beside me, his expression etched with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hand rubbing my back with soothing pressure. "You were thrashing, mumbling." I scanned the room, disoriented. Our bedroom. Early light filtered through the blinds. No suffocating alleys, no spectral pursuers. Only the ingrained comfort of the familiar. A nightmare," I rasped. "Running, Something chasing me. Leo drew me into an embrace. "It's all right," he murmured. "You're safe now. Just a dream." As my frantic heartbeat gradually subsided, I nodded, releasing a shaky sigh. Yes, just a dream. But as Leo rose to brew coffee, a residual disquiet clung to me. The phantasmagoria had possessed such visceral reality. Those footfalls still resonated, a phantom echo in my mind. Slipping from bed, I went to the window, parting the curtain to gaze at the tranquil street below. Utter normalcy. Dog walkers, early joggers, a delivery van navigating its route. Then, for a fleeting second, my breath caught. A figure standing stock still on the opposite pavement, gaze fixed upward toward my window. I blinked and it vanished. Imagination, I told myself firmly, letting the curtain drop. Just the lingering residue of fear. Yet, turning away, the conviction felt hollow, because for that brief, crystalline moment, the figure had seemed known. It resembled the silhouette from the alley, from the dream. I shook my head, attempting to banish the final tendrils of sleep and terror. It was only a dream, I repeated, a silent mantra. Only a dream. But somewhere deep within, a sliver of doubt persisted, and as I moved toward the kitchen, toward Leo, and the promise of coffee, I found myself listening, intently listening, for a rhythm that wasn't my own. Dismiss dolls as mere playthings? Such thoughts belong to those who've never known the suffocating stillness of a room governed by 30 pairs of unblinking eyes. I once scoffed at tales of haunted effigies, convinced my pragmatism was impervious to the uncanny pull of inanimate objects. Then came the 3 nights spent adrift in my sister Clara's bedroom, a visit that fundamentally rearranged my perception of the benign. It was a Wednesday, the sky bruised with late afternoon light, when I pulled up to Clara's new residence. Weariness clung to me like road dust after the long drive. Sanctuary was all I craved. Clara met me at the threshold, a whirlwind of quick embrace and effervescent smile. This larger house was her recent acquisition, a canvas she was eager to display, though my thoughts orbited solely around a hot shower and sustenance. Lugging my duffel inside, my gaze swept the entryway, walls the color of old cream, floors gleaming with polished hardwood, the air sharp with lemon polish. Cardboard skeletons of unpacked boxes lingered in corners, testament to her ongoing settling-in process. She led me towards her own chamber, the guest room still a hypothetical space amidst the chaos of relocation. More boxes formed precarious towers here, a small settee groaning under a landslide of blankets. Apologies tumbled out. Work's relentless demands had stalled her organizational efforts. I offered a non-committal nod. Comfort, not curation, was my priority. Her bed, at least, presented an island of order, crisply made. It was then my eyes snagged on the shelf, mounted high above her dresser. A silent porcelain congregation stared back. Easily 2, perhaps 3 dozen figures, marshaled in meticulous rows. Many possessed the fragile luminescence of bisque, their glassy eyes snaring the ambient light. Others, plastic-born, sported elaborate stiff gowns. Why so many? The question slipped out before I could temper it with tact. Clara offered a shrug, a casual gesture at odds with the sheer volume. "A habit," she murmured, "started back when I was a teenager." Her narrative drifted through origins, gifts received, treasures unearthed in dusty thrift stores, acquisitions clicked into existence online. Affection warmed her voice as she gestured towards one in a diminutive azure dress, chuckling when my expression remained stubbornly neutral. I attempted nonchalance, a flimsy shield against a rising tide of unease. Each doll, a frozen homunculus, aimed its gaze forward. Their irises spanned a spectrum of blues, browns, greens, some faded like old photographs, others disconcertingly vibrant. I mentally shook myself, attributing the prickling sensation to fatigue's strange distortions. Clara departed on a mission for groceries, leaving me to acclimate to my temporary crowded solitude. My backpack landed on the bed with a soft thud. I sat, the shelf now perfectly aligned with my eyeline. The collective stare felt palpable, a focused energy emanating from the ranks, though logic insisted it was merely perspective. My gaze traveled the faces. Minute scuffs marred some cheeks, while others retained flawless complexions. A few lips bore tiny chips, silent injuries of time. Resolutely, I sought refuge in the glowing screen of my phone, scrolling through the digital noise, attempting to drown out the silent scrutiny. Sleep claimed me reluctantly that first night, sometime past the midnight hour. Hours had dissolved in the living room's soft lamplight, punctuated by conversation with Clara, the rustle of takeout containers, and the flickering inanity of some forgotten television program. Finally succumbing to exhaustion, I retreated. Switching off the overhead glare, I relied on the bedside lamp's intimate pool of light. In its dim halo, the dolls sat transformed into rows of watchful eyes, tiny points of reflected luminescence. Entering the room felt akin to stepping onto a stage before a silent, critical audience. I burrowed beneath the covers, but every rustle of fabric, every shift of weight, seemed to conjure phantom movements on the shelf above. A head tilted infinitesimally closer, I'd freeze, pulse hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, only to find stillness upon a second, strained look. Weary of my own escalating paranoia, I clamped my eyes shut, adrift in a liminal space between wakefulness and slumber, cataloguing the house's nocturnal symphony. The groans of settling timbers, the low thrum of the air conditioning cycling on, the skeletal tap-tap-tapping of branches against the window pane. All perfectly normal, I insisted to the darkness. Around 3, a jolt tore me from sleep's embrace. A sound, faint, indistinct, perhaps a muffled thump or a scraping sigh, lingered at the edge of perception. Dream or reality? I lay rigid, breath held captive in my chest, eyes straining against the gloom. The lamp remained on, dialed down to its lowest ebb, casting the shelf and its occupants into deep shadow. My own breathing sounded harsh in the profound quiet. Listening intently, I detected nothing further. Silence reigned. Eventually, logic wrestled fear into submission. It was nothing. Rolling onto my side, I fixed my gaze on the blank wall, willing oblivion, until sleep, thin and fragile, reclaimed me. Morning light brought with it a sense of foolishness. Clara, already navigating the kitchen, laughed along with a crackling radio show, coffee steaming in her mug. I shuffled in, yawning, and accepted the offered warmth. Hear anything strange last night? The question felt tentative, even to my own ears. A puzzled frown creased her brow before she shook her head. I let it drop with a shrug, unwilling to cast myself as the overwrought guest. pivoting instead to inquiries about her weekend plans. The second day unfolded with unremarkable rhythm. Lunch at a clattering diner, the mundane choreography of grocery shopping. Back at the house, Clara vanished into her room to wrestle with more boxes, while I sifted through work emails on my phone, punctuated by the distant sounds of domestic activity, a closing door, a dropped object. Evening brought pizza and the promise of a movie in the living room. Declining immediate participation, I cited the need for my hoodie, necessitating a return trip to the doll-occupied chamber. Pushing the door open, flicking the light switch, I hesitated. An inexplicable compulsion drew my eyes upwards. What did I expect? A rearranged tableau? Evidence of nocturnal migration? They appeared unchanged, static in their serried ranks. Yet a subtle vacancy seemed to interrupt the second row, a missing presence I couldn't definitively recall from before. Snatching my hoodie, I retreated, chiding my overactive imagination. "Stop obsessing," I commanded myself. That night I sought refuge in sleep earlier, around 11. The prospect of another late-night vigil held no appeal. The overhead light yielded to darkness, the bedside lamp extinguished. Only a meager blade of light seeped beneath the door from the hallway, a compromise I deemed safer. If the room lay submerged in shadow, perhaps their eyes wouldn't find me. Sometime later, a whisper of sound, a soft rustle, broke the silence. My eyes snapped open, but the profound darkness rendered the shelf invisible. My heart commenced its familiar, frantic drumming. I waited, senses straining. The very air felt different, heavier, imbued with the charged stillness that precedes a storm. My hand fumbled for my phone, activating its flashlight. The beam shot out, illuminating the shelf. All present accounted for, yet one figure seemed skewed, tilted at an angle previously unnoticed, as if its head had turned just slightly. Certainty eluded me. I tried to steady the light, but my hand trembled. A parched, cottony sensation filled my mouth. Perhaps it had always leaned that way. Turning off the light, I forced my eyes shut again, breath catching in my throat, the thudding of my own pulse loud in my ears. Exhaustion eventually dragged me under. It was closer to 2 when I surfaced again, a knot of ice forming low in my gut. A primal sense of wrongness permeated the air. My eyes flew open. The phone, still clutched nearby, blazed to life at my touch. And there it sat, enthroned upon the duvet, mere inches from my feet. A porcelain figure regarded me with vacant intensity. Upright, perfectly poised against the rumpled fabric, its vitreous eyes captured the harsh LED glare. A strangled noise escaped my throat. Blonde ringlets framed a pallid, impassive face. The pink frock was achingly familiar from the shelf's crowded ranks. Its limbs weren't just resting, they were arranged, deliberately, in a seated posture. My heart hammered against my ribs with painful force. I scrambled backwards, nearly tumbling from the bed. Sandpaper coated my tongue. Questions detonated in my mind. A prank by Clara, a bizarre gravitational fluke. How could it possibly land sitting? Reaching out with a shaking hand, I grasped the doll's torso, holding it at arm's length. Its eyes seemed to drink the light. A chill traced paths along my arms, despite the room's stuffiness. I deposited it unceremoniously on the dresser. "Clara!" I hissed into the silence. "This isn't funny." I waited, half expecting her to emerge, grinning. The house remained deeply, unnervingly still. Standing there for several heartbeats, catching my breath, I retrieved the doll and wedged it firmly back onto the shelf between two others, ensuring its stability. My hands shook violently, sweat trickled down my temple. My fingers closed around the doorknob. I slipped into the hallway, blinking in the dull overhead light. Everything appeared ordinary. I padded to Clara's closed door, hesitating. A part of me dreaded her potential mockery, her dismissal of my sanity. But the need to know, to eliminate the possibility of a cruel joke, propelled me forward. A soft knock, her voice, thick with sleep, answered. Cracking the door, I murmured apologies for the intrusion. She squinted against the hallway light, hair askew. "Did you?" I began, voice low. "Did you move one of your dolls? Onto the bed? To scare me?" She frowned, confusion clouding her sleepy features, and shook her head. "She'd been asleep for hours," she mumbled. I saw no deceit in her groggy state, no hint of a smirk. I believed her. "Okay," I whispered, "sorry to wake you." I pulled the door shut and leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the hallway wall. A wave of nausea washed over me. Returning to that bedroom felt impossible. I stood rooted in the hallway for what felt like an eternity, the absurdity of the situation pressing in, making me feel simultaneously feverish and chilled. My palms were slick with cold sweat. The image of that doll, perched sentinel-like on the bed, burned behind my eyelids. Steeling myself, I darted back into the room, just long enough to snatch my bag and charger, pointedly avoiding a direct gaze at the shelf. The pink-dressed doll remained where I'd thrust it. Flicking off the light, I exited, pulling the door firmly closed behind me. An almost giddy sense of relief flooded me as I stood once more in the relative safety of the hallway, away from that silent, staring assembly. I migrated to the living room, depositing my belongings onto the couch. Sleep out here seemed the only tenable option. A small table lamp cast a comforting glow. I pulled a throw blanket from the back of the sofa and sat, my mind a frantic carousel of thoughts. Logical explanations warred with the chilling impossibility. A fall, landing upright, placed. I didn't want to alarm Clara further, nor ignite a debate over her cherished collection. Surviving the remaining hours was the sole objective. The television flickered to life on low volume, a meaningless distraction. My pulse remained stubbornly elevated. Every creak and groan of the house elicited a reflexive flinch. Eventually, sheer mental fatigue blurred the edges of consciousness, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep, the TV murmuring its electronic lullaby. The next morning, Clara discovered me cocooned on the couch. "Bed uncomfortable?" she inquired, brow furrowed slightly. I admitted, haltingly, that I hadn't slept well, that perhaps the dolls were unsettling me. Surprise flickered in her eyes, but no anger. She immediately offered to relocate them, an offer I declined. It felt simpler just to avoid the room entirely. I had no desire to handle them again, nor to cause her distress. The matter rested there. For the remainder of my visit, the living room couch served as my bed. I entered the bedroom only for swift retrievals of clothing, my gaze averted from the shelf, a familiar clenching in my stomach whenever my peripheral vision caught a glimpse of porcelain faces. On the final morning, gathering my scattered possessions felt like a covert operation. The dolls maintained their silent vigil, rose undisturbed. I crammed clothes into my bag with hurried efficiency. Goodbyes were exchanged in the neutral territory of the living room, accompanied by my vague promise of a return visit. The doll incident left unspoken. It wasn't until I was securely belted into my car, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror, that the knot of tension in my chest finally began to loosen. Relief washed over me, vast and profound. Yet the indelible image persisted. The doll on the bed, its glassy stare fixed upon me in the flashlight's glare. It sends a phantom shiver down my spine even now. I've stopped searching for rational explanations. Some experiences defy neat categorization. All I know with unshakable certainty is that I will never again pass a night under the watchful gaze of that collection. Should the offer arise, the memory of that face in the darkness will be sufficient deterrent. I'll find another couch, another floor, another town if necessary. There are some vigils a person ought not keep twice. The weak pulse of my torch painted jittery specters across the vast concrete skin of the derelict warehouse. Years I'd walked these rounds, guardian of dust and echoes, yet nothing forewarned me of the revelation coiled in the building's forsaken heart. Plunging deeper into the consuming blackness, I was oblivious. This routine passage through the night was about to unravel into a desperate scramble for something more than just keeping my post. Midnight had bled into the new day, rendering the warehouse sepulchral quiet. Only the whisper drag of my boots on gritty concrete and the sporadic groan of old metal contracting in the chill air disturbed the profound stillness. 1,000 times I'd traced this path, yet this night hummed with an alien frequency, a palpable wrongness tightening the atmosphere. My torch beam sliced the gloom, interrogating ranks of shrouded shelves, monuments to inertia. All seemed untouched, undisturbed for months, trapped in the limbo of a renovation project, long since stalled or forgotten. Just as I pivoted towards the distant sanctuary of my station, a sound snagged my attention. Faint, a mere tremor in the silence, yet in that vacuum, it detonated like a dropped pin amplified to a gunshot. I froze, muscles taut, straining to decipher it. Again, a delicate friction, a furtive shuffling, like weary weight being dragged across the floor. My pulse leapt, a frantic drummer against my ribs. Vagrants seeking refuge weren't unknown, drawn by the promise of shelter, but this wing was sealed, impenetrable. How? Protocol screamed, "Radio dispatch, request backup," but a ravenous curiosity, sharp and insistent, gnawed through procedure. I had to witness the source. With deliberate, hushed steps, I navigated toward the disturbance emanating from behind a towering barricade of ancient, splintered crates pressed against the far wall. Closer now, strained whispers reached me, urgent, conspiratorial breaths in the dark. I eased around the obstruction, my light carving an arc through the space beyond. The sight stole my breath, the gasp echoing unnaturally in the cavernous expanse. There, clustered within a fragile haven fashioned from detritus, were no fewer than a dozen souls, men, women, startlingly, even children. They flinched, eyes screwing shut against the sudden glare, their faces etched with a volatile blend of fear and gritty defiance. "Please," a woman breathed, her voice a threadbare prayer, "don't make us go." I stood transfixed, the beam trembling in my hand. This wasn't a handful of transients. It was a hidden colony, burrowed into the warehouse's neglected belly. "How?" How long? The question stumbled out, my voice rough. I lowered the torch, softening the invasive light. An older man, his beard a wild grey tangle, became their spokesman. Months, he answered, the words sharp with bitterness. Since they boarded this place up for their improvements, nowhere else. The shelters overflow, the streets devour. This was all that was left. My gaze swept their improvised world, blankets strung like fragile partitions, a small gas stove tucked in a corner, a humble collection of books and worn toys, testifying to the presence of the young. My thoughts spun, chaotic. The sheer impossibility of their sustained concealment stunned me. More pressingly, what burden did this discovery lay upon me? You can't remain, I stated, the mandated words tasting like ash. It's unsafe. Discovery by management. We won't survive out there, the woman, Ilara, interjected, her voice gaining desperate strength. We have little ones. As if summoned, a small boy, all wide, terrified eyes, peeked from behind her legs. A painful knot tightened in my chest. Duty was clear. Alert authorities. Initiate removal. My job description etched in stark clarity. Yet, confronting their faces, the raw desperation warring with fragile hope in their eyes, the mandate fractured. I couldn't enact it. All right, I murmured, the sound swallowed by the vastness. All right, let me think. I paced, a caged animal in the torchlight's glare, fingers raking through my hair. Madness. Abetting them meant courting dismissal, perhaps legal repercussions. Reporting them meant condemning them to an unknown, likely brutal, reality. Okay, I conceded, turning back to face the silent, watchful group. Listen, you stay, for now, but we have to be invisible. The following hour became a hushed conspiracy. Together, we fortified their concealment, shifting crates into a more labyrinthine defense, identifying the blind angles of the seldom monitored cameras. This section's my beat, exclusively, I explained, but vigilance is paramount. Any unusual activity, vanish. Erase every daytime sign of your existence. Earnest nods met my instructions, their relief a palpable wave. As I prepared to retreat, the old man, Corvus, grasped my arm, his touch surprisingly firm. Thank you, he rasped, emotion thickening his voice. This means more than you can fathom. I offered only a curt nod, words failing me. Returning to my lonely station felt like crossing into another dimension, my mind a maelstrom. What had I set in motion? What intricate deception must I now maintain? The subsequent weeks became a tightrope walk over a precipice. Each nightly round included a clandestine check-in, a delivery of small necessities, food, warmer blankets, a few paperbacks for the children. Their quiet gratitude was a heavy, humbling reward. Yet the strain mounted relentlessly. Every distant clang, every shifting shadow sent jolts of adrenaline through me. I lived on a knife's edge, haunted by the phantom footsteps of discovery. Then, inevitably, the night arrived when the phantom solidified. Deep within my patrol route, voices echoed, not the muted tones of the hidden enclave, but loud, carrying authority. A chill traced my spine as I recognized the sharp cadence of Thorn, my supervisor. I'm telling you, something's amiss back here, Davies. Power consumption's irregular. Heard noises myself last week. Swear I did. Panic spurred me into a stumbling run, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Warn them. Give them seconds to dissolve into the shadows. I rounded the final stack of shelving just as Thorn, flanked by 2 other facility men, materialized ahead. They halted, surprise flickering across their features. "Silas, what brings you this deep?" Thorn's query was laced with nascent suspicion. My mouth opened, fumbling for a plausible lie, but a sudden, sharp crash reverberated from behind the crates. A child's mishap, a dropped object in the frantic scramble to hide. Thorn's gaze narrowed instantly. "What was that?" he snapped, pushing past my frozen form. "Wait!" I choked out, but he was already moving, purposeful strides eating the distance to the concealed camp, his companions trailing like hounds. Helplessly, I watched the inevitable unveiling, the ripped-aside blankets, the terrified faces blinking in the harsh glare of multiple flashlights. "Silas, what in God's name is this?" Thorn roared, whirling on me, his face contorted with fury. "You've been sheltering vagrants. Do you comprehend the gravity of this?" I stood rooted, mind wiped clean. I saw the naked fear paralyzing the community, felt the fragile world I'd helped sustain shatter around them. Then, something ignited within the paralysis. "They aren't vagrants," I heard myself say, my voice unexpectedly firm. "They're people, people abandoned, people failed by the very systems meant to offer aid." I took a step forward, positioning myself as a shield between Thorn's wrath and the huddled group. "You want explanations for power usage? Children need light to read by. You heard noises? People need to eat, to breathe, to live." Thorn's complexion deepened to an alarming crimson, but the words poured out, unstoppable. "I know I broke regulations. I know this likely costs me my livelihood, but I wouldn't change it. Sometimes decency outweighs directives. Sometimes humanity is the only rule worth following." A profound silence descended, thick and heavy. Every eye was fixed on me. The moment stretched taut with consequence. Unexpectedly, one of Thorn's companions broke the tension. "He's got a point, boss," he murmured. "Can't just toss them out like garbage." Thorn's gaze flickered between me, the frightened collective, and back again. I saw the internal war play out across his features, duty grappling with a reluctant empathy. Finally, a long, weary sigh escaped him, his shoulders slumping. "All right, Silas, point taken. But this arrangement, it ends. Not like this." What followed was hours of raw, difficult conversation about the gaping holes in social safety nets, the scarcity of true sanctuary, the human toll of willful blindness. As dawn painted the grimy windows with tentative strokes of light, the seeds of an actual plan began to sprout. The company, nudged by conscience and circumstance, would collaborate with local charities. This forgotten wing might yet become a legitimate haven. Watching the first sunbeams pierce the dusty air, illuminating the weary but resilient faces of those I'd risked everything for, a crushing weight seemed to dissolve within me. The path forward remained uncertain, fraught with bureaucracy, inevitable conflicts. Yet, for the first time in weeks, genuine hope flickered, because even in the deepest shadows, the ember of human kindness can stubbornly glow, and once witnessed, its light irrevocably changes how you see the world. A flicker in the obsidian depths of the security monitor. A blur, a fleeting density against the sculpted forms of the great hall. My pulse gave a startled leap. Had my eyes, strained by the nascent hours of the shift, conjured phantoms from the pixels? I blinked, leaned closer, searching the electronic vista. Gone. The corridor stretched vacant, bathed in the low, sterile glow. Though the night was young, that ephemeral disturbance frayed my composure. A slow inhalation, a muttered dismissal. A glitch, surely. And the weight of the flashlight settled into my palm. Yet a visceral certainty coiled in my gut, refusing to be ignored. I am the solitary custodian of slumbering history, the night sentinel of this sprawling museum. 6 months I've walked these echoing corridors, a ghost among ghosts. The wings unfurl like ancient maps, canvases dreaming in pigment, relics wrested from the earth, fragile scripts whispering forgotten tongues, and the vast, silent theater of sculpture. My nightly pilgrimage involves tracing these arteries, verifying the electronic eyes, securing the thresholds. Silence is the norm, punctuated only by the low thrum of the climate control and the solitary counterpoint of my own tread on the polished stone. But roughly a month passed, the familiar quiet began to curdle. It commenced as a whisper-light percussion, the barest suggestion of footsteps. Deep within the sculpture wing, my flashlight beam would skate across the glacial expanse of marble, illuminating the towering, impassive figures. I moved with deliberate slowness, confirming locked doors, the vigilant gleam of alarm sensors, then the sound, faint impacts, trailing just behind me. Not forceful, more like tentative taps against the stone. They'd ricochet off the high walls, a disorienting echo that defied location. Each time I spun, light spearing the shadows, the space behind me yawned empty. A pause, breath held captive in my chest, yielded nothing. I'd move on, initially attributing the phantom cadence to the hall's acoustics playing tricks with my own steps. But the phenomenon intensified. One night, the steps performed an unnerving ballet around me. I stood near a corner plinth, examining the base of a marble athlete for any sign of disturbance, when the soft tread manifested to my right. A swift pivot, the flashlight beam slicing through rows of frozen forms. Nothing. Silence descended. Then, the faint patter resumed, this time from the left. Another turn. More steps, now distinctly behind me. A tremor began in my hands, the cone of light stuttering against the impassive stone faces. Each time I sought to pinpoint the source, the steps ceased. A game of auditory hide-and-seek. A constriction tightened my throat. My chest felt heavy as lead. Forcing stillness upon myself for a long moment, I finally retreated, rationalizing a need to consult the security monitors. Back in the control room, the screens displayed only stark, unmoving emptiness. The corridors remained lifeless. A wave of foolishness washed over me, yet the frantic tattoo of my pulse persisted. I remember swiping beads of sweat from my brow, the air conditioning's chill utterly failing to cool the internal fire. Building settlement, errant drafts through vents. I offered myself these mundane explanations, but a deeper instinct knew them false. The clarity of those footsteps lingered, too distinct to be mere echo. Another time, spectral impressions marred the floor. The museum's surfaces, buffed to a mirror sheen each dawn by a meticulous cleaning crew, were usually immaculate. That night, patrolling near the Roman bust exhibit, I discovered them, dusty outlines leading from the main entryway toward the room's center. smaller than my own heavy boots, yet not diminutive enough for a child. I followed their trail with my beam, crouching low. They simply stopped several feet in, an abrupt cessation, as if their maker had been plucked vertically into the air. My light probed beneath display cases, behind pedestals. No concealment offered itself. Then came the familiar prickle, icy tendrils creeping up the back of my neck, the sensation of being watched. A glance over my shoulder revealed the silent assembly of marble countenances, their vacant gazes unnerving in the nocturnal gloom. But tonight, one seemed altered. Its face, tilted almost imperceptibly, appeared directed towards me. I froze, fixing the beam squarely upon it. The sculpted expression remained unchanged, lips parted in that stiff, archaic fashion. Yet the conviction lingered. It had moved. A primal urge to flee warred with duty. I approached the bust cautiously, seeking confirmation. Had it always been angled thus? My fingers grazed the cold, unyielding permanence of the stone, testing for looseness. Any sign of recent adjustment by the maintenance team. Solid. The base was undisturbed. The label offered no annotation of repositioning. A faint trembling returned to my arms, my breathing ragged. Imagination, I chided myself, forcing my legs to carry me onward. The following evening brought a faint chittering sound from the vicinity of the Greek statues. Life-sized, petrified titans poised on lofty plinths, enacting frozen mythologies. Hearing the noise, an abrasive whisper against the silence, I advanced down the row, my flashlight tracing the floor. Near one pedestal, something caught the light, tiny constellations of stone dust. Kneeling, I rubbed the gritty fragments between my fingertips. My gaze lifted to the statue above, an ancient hero, arms dynamically raised as if mid-spear thrust. I scanned its form meticulously, searching for the source, a fresh fracture, nothing apparent. The figure seemed intact, though, was its head canted differently? Again, that unsettling perception of a subtle reorientation. I backed away slowly, my grip tightening on the flashlight, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Later, ensconced in the relative sanctuary of the security room, I scrutinized the camera feeds. No anomaly explained the scraping. Rubbing tired eyes, I zoomed in on the Hellenic gallery. Stillness reigned. I rose, paced the confines of the small room, swallowed lukewarm coffee, listening. A dull concussion echoed from the distance. I jolted, the coffee cup rattling against the desk, as I snatched for my flashlight. Leaving the cup, I slipped into the corridor. The sound had originated from the sculpture wing. I moved with exaggerated care, each footfall amplified in the void. Reaching the corner, I peered cautiously into the dimly lit expanse. Shapes loomed, the statues mere silhouettes against the low ambient light. The hero figure stood to the left, seemingly unchanged, yet radiating that unnerving focus I'd begun to dread. Holding my breath, straining to hear past my own blood rushing, I caught it. A soft exhalation, intimate and chillingly close, directly behind me. I spun, a desperate pirouette, flashlight beam slashing wildly, empty space. The corridor stretched vacant. My scalp prickled, skin turning cold. The breath had been sharp, brief. A choked invective escaped my lips as I raked a hand across my face. Control yourself. But I was profoundly shaken. My light swept the corridor again, floor to ceiling. Only more statues watched from the shadowed corners of the tall walls. No lurking form, no intruder. I proceeded mechanically, checking doors along the route. Each handle turned against a locked mechanism. I pulled, tugged harder than necessary. Secure. My eyes scanned the floor for prints. This time, the tiles gleamed clean, reflecting only the dull overhead lamps. "Is anyone here?" My voice, thin and strained, was swallowed by the immensity. No reply. The remainder of that night bled away in the security room, counting down the seconds to sanctuary, my stomach a tight knot. I stared at the monitors, half expecting, half dreading a figure to coalesce from the shadows. It never did. My anxiety vibrated through me, my legs restless beneath the desk. In the ensuing days, I sought refuge in routine, arriving early to walk the halls, bathed in the clarifying light of day. Everything appeared benign then. The statues reverted to inert artistry, their eerie expressions softened by the sun. The curator, the day staff, their presence, their mundane tasks, provided the comforting rhythm of normalcy. But inevitably, dusk would descend, and the museum would transform. The silence grew denser, pregnant with unseen possibilities, and every creak, every sigh of the building became a potential threat that made me flinch. One evening, commencing my rounds at the appointed hour, I traced the familiar path: main entrance, medieval armor exhibit, the hushed gallery of paintings. Then, drawing a deep breath, I navigated the artery towards the heart of the disquiet, the sculpture wing. A wide hallway, lined with smaller artifacts entombed in glass, led to its entrance. As I neared the threshold, a faint, dry rapping sounded from within, like knuckles against plaster. I paused, pressing my ear to the open doorway. Silence. Stepping inside, I swept the flashlight beam left, then right. The silent sentinels stood arrayed on either side, some cordoned by velvet ropes, others disturbingly proximate. I advanced to the room's center, pausing intermittently, my shoes squeaking offensively on the polished floor despite my attempts at stealth. Suddenly, a pocket of unnatural frost touched the back of my neck, a gust of frigid air where no vent existed. I whipped around, flashlight held defensively at chest height, braced to confront a face. Again, nothing. Only the lingering cold on my skin, raising goose flesh, making me shiver involuntarily. Resolutely, I began my inspection, statue by statue, base, label, posture. I scrutinized each element, etching their details into memory, seeking deviation. Most remained steadfastly unchanged. Then I reached a centerpiece, a robed figure with one arm outstretched. Something felt wrong. The extended arm seemed higher than I recalled. Kneeling, I rested the flashlight on the floor, angling its beam upward. I stared intently at the limb, wrestling with memory. My chest tightened. It was raised further. A subtle elevation, perhaps, but a definite defiance of its remembered pose. Leaning closer, my fingers brushed the stone. A jolt of frigid energy shot up my arm. I snatched my hand back as if burned. Simultaneously, my radio erupted in a burst of electronic shrapnel, startling a near yelp from me. Fumbling at my belt, I keyed the transmitter. "Elias here. Go ahead." Only static answered, crackling aggressively before dying. Clipping the radio back, I stood, forcing measured breaths. My palms were slick with sweat. I scanned the area for any sign of tools, forced entry, evidence of human intervention. Nothing. I exited the sculpture wing, continuing my rounds, checking doors, finding everything locked tight. It was then I resolved to chronicle the uncanny. An old logbook surfaced in the security office. Henceforth, after each patrol, I documented everything: footprints, statue positions, anomalous sounds, sensations, anything outside the realm of the ordinary, time-stamped for later correlation with camera footage. One night, near 2:01 a.m., the entry reads, "Heard labored breathing close behind near Greek hero statue. Turned, no one present. Noticed fresh chips on statue's pedestal." Another, found 3 distinct sets of dusty footprints near Roman busts. Vanished mid-floor. I tentatively broached the subject with Ronan, one of the day guards, asking elliptically if he'd ever experienced anything unusual in the sculpture hall. He offered a shrug, a jest about nocturnal spookiness, but nothing substantive. I didn't press further, embarrassment warring with conviction. I felt increasingly isolated, perhaps unhinged, but the notebook filled, each entry reinforcing the chilling hypothesis. One night around the nadir of the graveyard shift, 3:00 a.m., I was scrying the digital eyes of the cameras. Switching to the feed covering the north corridor, I saw it, a phantom twitch at the screen's edge. Leaning in, adjusting my view, my heart hammered as I recognized a statue's head. It turned, a slow, deliberate rotation, almost a nod. Then the feed dissolved into a cascade of static, the screen momentarily black. Muttering curses, I slapped the monitor's flank, willing it back. When the image returned, the statue was impassive, facing forward as always. I rewound the recording. The glitch repeated at the precise moment, erasing the impossible articulation. A chill traced my spine. Slamming a fist lightly on the keyboard in frustration, I stood and went directly to that corridor. Flashlight beam, a nervous probe. The statues stood in silent ranks, betraying no hint of recent animation. The hallway felt colder than usual, the hum of the overhead lights unnervingly loud. I approached the specific statue, an old carving of a regal figure in formal robes. Circling it, I examined the base, the pedestal, the identifying tag. Nothing amiss. A pressure built in my chest, the feeling of breath held too long. Exhaling raggedly, I forced calm. Then, leaning close to the statue's stone visage, its blank eyes stared past me into the gloom. Yet I perceived it, a subtle tilt to the head, a nuance of posture unseen before. My pulse surged anew. Pulling out my phone, I attempted to capture evidence, proof for my own sanity. The camera refused to focus. The image swam, the lens hunting futilely. 3 attempts yielded only blurred, distorted pictures. I wiped the lens, thinking it smudged. The results remained the same. Digital noise refusing to capture the impossible. Shoving the phone back into my pocket, I turned away, every nerve ending alight, a frantic pulse throbbing in my neck. I retreated to the security room, feeling utterly drained. The recent nights have followed this pattern. I walk the rounds, haunted by ephemeral footfalls that cannot be mine, feeling icy sighs brush my skin, discovering footprints that evaporate into nothingness. Sometimes, plinths seem shifted by infinitesimal degrees. Occasionally, telltale detritus, dust, minute stone chips, appears on the floor, hinting at nocturnal migrations. I find no rational explanation. No tangible intruder ever manifests, yet the sense of presence is undeniable. An unseen observer perpetually at my periphery. My hands remain damp, my throat dry, my spine held rigid against the expected touch. I cling to logic, the old building settling, drafts playing tricks, but these flimsy shields crumble against the mounting evidence. Statues subtly altering their poses when unwatched. The footprints, the breathing, the static, the visual anomalies. They weave a narrative I cannot decipher, but increasingly fear. Tonight, as I commit these words to the logbook, the faint cadence of steps has returned, sounding from the adjacent room. My heart pounds against my ribs. The flashlight rests on the desk, its familiar weight yet unclaimed. I hesitate, trying to quell the rising tide of dread. Do I venture out, or do I remain here, feigning deafness? My hands tremble, but the imperative of duty remains. Fear cannot paralyze me indefinitely. I will take the flashlight. I will walk back into that hall. I will see if the silent sentinels have stirred. Uncertainty churns within me, a nauseating mix of terror and compulsion. My stomach is a knot. My palms are slick, but I will go. If the breathing returns, I will turn faster this time. If footprints appear, I will follow them to their impossible end. I need resolution, whether it reveals a human prankster or confirms the presence of something else. I am standing now, poised to leave the security room's meager light. My breath comes quick and shallow. My forehead is damp. Pushing the door open, I step into the corridor. An overhead light flickers erratically. Faulty wiring, I tell myself, forcing one foot before the other. I glance at the camera feed on my phone. No signal, the connection weak here, deepening my isolation. My nerves feel like live wires. The steps are louder now, a distinct rhythm echoing towards me down the long hall. I swallow against a dry throat. Raising the flashlight, its beam cuts through the gloom, and I think I see a shape, a fleeting density, slip behind a distant pedestal. Real? Imagined? My heart slams against my sternum like a frantic prisoner. There can be no retreat now. Dawn is hours away. I am bound to this place, to this escalating strangeness. I must continue. It is my charge, and I can no longer leave this alone. It began, as such things often do, with a flicker at the periphery. A face framed in glass, observed fleetingly one Tuesday, as I made the mundane journey to my car. An instant, nothing more, yet the sheer concentration in that gaze snagged my attention. A momentary snag in the fabric of the ordinary. I dismissed it, a phantom conjured by an overtaxed mind. How could I have known that fleeting image was the seed of a dread that would soon colonize my world? My name is Clara. For half a year, I'd inhabited this enclave of manicured suburban quietude, a place where sprinklers pulsed in unison at dusk, and whispers rode the breeze with startling velocity. I'd sought refuge here from the city's relentless thrum, cultivating a deliberate solitude. The face belonged to the man next door. I recognized him vaguely, perhaps early 50s, hair receding from his temples, a mouth set in a permanent bracket of disapproval. Our interactions had been limited to the briefest, most perfunctory nods across the invisible boundary dividing our properties. His name remained a blank, but after that Tuesday, his presence began to assert itself, bleeding into the edges of my awareness. It started subtly, the prickling sensation on the nape of my neck as I knelt among the rose bushes, a glance up revealing only the hasty retreat of a shadow from his window pane. Retrieving the mail, I'd find him suddenly materialized on his porch, observing me with that same unwavering, assessing intensity. I spun rationalizations, loneliness perhaps, or simple curiosity about the newcomer. Yet day by day, the feeling intensified, the weight of an unseen gaze pressing down. One evening, maybe a week after the initial sighting, the silence was broken as I wrestled with the recycling bin. A splendid evening, wouldn't you agree? The voice, unexpected, sent a jolt through me. He stood at the edge of his lawn, hands buried in his pockets, a smile stretched thin across his features, failing to ignite any warmth in his eyes. "Oh yes, quite lovely," I managed, startled into stammering. "I'm Silas," he offered, closing the distance by a step. "It seems we haven't had a formal introduction." I manufactured a polite smile, attempting to quell the frantic chiming of internal alarms. "Clara, a pleasure." A brief exchange followed, orbiting the neutral territory of weather and local ordinances. Yet an undercurrent of wrongness persisted. His eyes, like chips of flint, never left my face, absorbing every nuance. The nervous twist of a strand of my hair, the pleat in my blouse. Excusing myself felt like escaping a tangible pressure. Back inside, the click of the deadbolt was unusually loud. Through the peephole, I saw him, Silas, still rooted to his spot, his silhouette stark against the fading light, gaze fixed on my front door. In the ensuing days, Silas's presence became a constant, unwelcome counterpoint to my own movements. His routines seemed unnervingly synchronized with mine. My departure for work coincided with his retrieval of the morning paper. My return aligned with his meticulous watering of suspiciously resilient geraniums. Always there, always watching. I began altering my schedule, weaving unpredictable patterns into my days, taking circuitous routes home. It made no difference. One dawn, leaving a full hour earlier than usual, I found him bent over the open hood of his car. "Engine trouble?" I inquired, striving for nonchalance. He straightened, that disquieting smile resurfacing. "Preventative measures merely. You're making an early start." The simple observation landed with chilling weight. How could he know this wasn't my norm? Weeks bled into a month, and Silas's intrusions grew bolder. I'd return to find my porch swing subtly askew, or phantom blooms, marigolds I hadn't planted, appearing overnight in the petunia bed. Once, pulling into the driveway, I swore I saw the flutter of a curtain in my own living room, a ghost of movement behind the sheer fabric. Inside, however, everything lay undisturbed. Paranoia began to whisper. Was I inventing this, misinterpreting the actions of an eccentric, perhaps lonely man? Then came the night that shattered all doubt, crystallizing fear into cold certainty. A sound jolted me from sleep near 3 a.m. A settling creak, I told myself, initially. But then it came again, distinct, sharp. The specific groan of the third floorboard in the downstairs hallway. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, finding only a dead black screen. I distinctly remembered plugging it in. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of sleep. Sliding silently from bed, I crept towards the door, peering into the shadowed corridor. A shape, darker than the surrounding gloom, shifted at the base of the stairs. Someone was inside. Retreating into the bedroom, my hands scrabbled frantically for anything resembling a weapon, finally closing around the cool, heavy base of a desk lamp. With trembling fingers, I yanked the plug from the wall. Footsteps ascended the stairs now, slow, measured, each tread echoing in the suffocating silence. I flattened myself behind the bedroom door, lamp held high, every muscle coiled tight. The footsteps halted directly outside. I held my breath. The doorknob began to turn, agonizingly slow. As the gap widened, I swung the lamp with the desperate force of pure terror. A sickening impact, a guttural grunt of pain. The figure stumbled back, clutching his head. In the thin moonlight slanting through the window, I saw his face. Silas. "What in God's name are you doing in my house?" The words tore from my throat, raw with fear and fury, the lamp still poised to strike. Blood seeped between the fingers pressed to his temple, but the expression in his eyes wasn't pain or even anger. It was something else, something terrifying, a kind of rapturous, manic delight. "Oh, Clara," he breathed, his voice unnervingly placid. "I've been inside many times. I know all your little secrets. The precise shade of blue of your favorite morning mug. The novel on your nightstand. Page 94, I believe. The faint scent of lavender from the lotion you smooth on your skin before sleep." Nausea churned within me. Every dismissed intuition, every inexplicable detail, the misplaced object, the sense of being watched. It was all horribly real. He had breached these walls, infiltrated my sanctuary, catalogued my existence. "Leave," I whispered, the word trembling. "Leave now, or I swear I'll call the police." Silas's smile stretched wider, grotesque. "By all means, alert them. Describe how your concerned neighbor has merely been attentive. They'll dismiss you as overwrought." As he spoke, however, his gaze flickered past me. Following his line of sight, my eyes landed on it. The small, dark lens of the camera I'd hidden on the bookshelf days before. A desperate measure against my mounting unease. He saw the recognition flood my face, his predatory confidence visibly fractured. "You recorded this?" The question was low, laced with a sudden, venomous awareness. I nodded, my grip tightening on the lamp's base. "Every moment. Now get out of my house before I present the authorities with definitive proof of your neighborly concern." For a heart-stopping second, I thought he would lunge. His hands balled into fists, his body tensed. Then, abruptly, the aggression seemed to drain from him. He spun and bolted down the stairs. The slam of the front door echoed through the violated silence. Sleep was impossible. I spent the remaining hours huddled against the bedroom door, lamp clutched tight, starting at every creak and groan of the settling house. At dawn, I called the police. They arrived swiftly. I showed them the footage. Silas's house stood empty. He had vanished into the night. But what the officers discovered within its walls turned my blood to ice. An entire room consecrated to me. Walls plastered with photographs, hundreds upon hundreds, capturing me everywhere. Navigating grocery aisles, concentrating at my office desk, moving within the presumed privacy of my own home. Stacks of printed emails, transcripts of intercepted messages, a calendar meticulously charting my daily rhythms. The police catalogued it all, bagging the evidence of his obsession. They offered reassurances, promised pursuit, declared me safe. But standing amidst that chilling shrine, a sickening mosaic of stolen moments, I knew safety was a shore I might never reach again. I moved within the week, abandoning the house, now irrevocably tainted. New phone number, new email address, even a different hair color. My new apartment boasts formidable security, and therapy sessions attempt to mend the psychic fractures. Yet months later, the phantom echo of his stare remains. A curtain twitching in a window across the street. A car idling too long at the curb. Each sends adrenaline searing through me. Locking doors becomes a ritual. Routines are deliberately shattered. Because Silas is out there, the knowledge is a cold stone in my gut, and the question haunts my sleepless nights. Does his fixation still burn for me? Or has he shifted his terrible focus, found some other unsuspecting soul to ensnare in his suffocating web? It's a perverse hope, I know, that his obsession remains mine, because the alternative, the thought of him beginning this slow, horrifying descent upon another woman, oblivious and vulnerable, is an abyss too terrifying to contemplate. So I watch, I remain alert, a sentinel forged in fear, because the chilling truth I learned is that the monster isn't always a lurking shadow in the dark. Sometimes he lives just next door, masked by civility, and he watches. Always, he watches. The first glimpse I had of them, the Holloways next door, painted them as paragons dropped onto our sleepy lane, a balm to its quietude. Julian, Clara, and little Lily. They might have sprung from some sun-drenched canvas depicting domestic bliss. Yet here I crouch, the flimsy wood of my bedroom door groaning under Julian's assault, the illusion shattered. Perfection, I now grasp, with chilling certainty, often wears the deepest shadows as its lining. It began 3 months prior, under a sky scrubbed clean by summer. The divorce had left me adrift, clinging to the house that felt like the last piece of solid ground. Then came the rumbling arrival of the moving van next door, breathing life into the silence the neighboring house had held for almost a year. Through the slit in my curtains, I watched them disembark. Julian, possessing an easy grace and a smile that etched pleasant lines around his eyes. Clara, willowy and fair, her hair a tidy sweep of gold, and young Lily, maybe 5, maybe 6, trailing them with a plush rabbit clutched tight. An unwelcome pang of envy struck me. They were the tableau I'd once dreamed of assembling, a dream now gathering dust. Still, neighborliness called. Armed with a plate of still warm molasses cookies, I crossed the lawn. Clara opened the door, her smile radiant, genuine. "How incredibly kind," she chimed, taking the offering. "Julian, Lily, our neighbor is here." They materialized beside her, a perfect composition. Julian's handshake was firm, confident. "A pleasure," he stated. "We're eager to settle in, become part of things." Lily peered from the shelter of her mother's legs, timid yet intrigued. I knelt. "Hello, Lily. I like your rabbit. What's his name?" A grave nod. "Bun Bun," she breathed. A smile tugged at my lips. So utterly normal, so pleasant. What inkling could I have had of the rot beneath the polish? In the subsequent weeks, the Holloways wove themselves effortlessly into the neighborhood fabric. Clara found her place in the book circle. Julian threw himself into coaching the children's baseball league. Their backyard gathering drew nearly everyone from the street, cementing their popularity. I found myself drawn into Clara's orbit. Morning coffees became our ritual after Julian departed for work and Lily for kindergarten. Ensconced in her spotless kitchen, we traded stories and laughter, the ease between us growing. "Moving here was the best decision," Clara confessed one morning, her fingers laced around a steaming cup. "Exactly what we needed after, well, you know, everything before." My curiosity flickered. "Oh? Trouble at the old place?" A fleeting darkness crossed her features, vanishing almost before I registered it. "Just one of those things," she deflected smoothly. "Sometimes a clean slate is all you need." I let it rest, respecting the boundary. We all carried our unseen baggage. But then, the anomalies began. Small inconsistencies, easily dismissed in isolation. The almost imperceptible way Clara might recoil from Julian's sudden movements. The muffled cadence of arguments drifting through thin walls late at night. Lily, once bubbly, growing quieter, her eyes large and watchful. I chided myself, convinced I was projecting my own marital wreckage onto their seemingly flawless union. Yet the dissonant notes persisted. One sun-drenched afternoon, tending my roses, I heard it. A sharp crash from their house, followed by Clara's stifled cry. I froze, trowel suspended, straining to hear. A beat of silence, then Julian's voice, pitched too low to decipher, followed by an unnerving quiet from Clara. That night wrestled with me. Intervene, remain silent. The fear of misjudgment, of shattering a family over unfounded suspicions, paralyzed me. Ultimately, I resolved to speak to Clara, gently. I invited her for coffee the next morning, rehearsing careful phrases. She arrived wearing a faint bruise high on her cheekbone, artfully, though not entirely, masked by concealer. "Clara," I began softly. "What happened?" Her hand flew to her cheek. "This? Oh, clumsy me. Collided with a kitchen cabinet door." I drew a steadying breath. "Clara, yesterday, I heard something. Are you certain everything is all right?" Her eyes widened, stark fear flashing before the placid mask snapped back into place. "Perfectly fine," she insisted, her tone unnaturally bright. Julian and I couldn't be happier. The plea I saw swimming beneath the surface silenced my urge to press further. She wasn't ready. I couldn't make her be. A chill descended after that. Clara's invitations ceased. Our encounters on the street were brief, her smiles taut. And Julian began to watch me. His gaze, when I caught it from across the lawns, was unnervingly cold, analytical. A primal instinct screamed at me then. Call someone, anyone, a helpline, the authorities. But cowardice held me fast. It wasn't my place, I reasoned weakly. I could be wrong, until the night I heard Lily scream. Well past midnight, sleep eluding me, I sat near my window. Then the sound sliced through the stillness. A child's raw terror, abruptly choked off. Before conscious thought formed, I was across the lawn, hammering on their door. Julian answered disheveled, his eyes ignited with a barely restrained fury. "What?" he spat. "I heard... Lily, is she okay?" I stammered, suddenly small. His expression morphed instantly, concern layering over the rage. "Nightmare," he said, his voice regaining its smooth veneer. "She's fine. Go home." But past his shoulder, I saw her. Clara. One eye was swollen nearly shut, a trickle of blood marking her lip. Our gazes locked for a fraction of a second, and in hers, I saw a desperate, silent appeal. "I'm calling the police," I heard myself say, my voice trembling but firm. Julian's control fractured. "You're calling no one," he snarled, moving towards me. I spun to flee, but he was quicker, his hand clamping onto my arm like a vice, dragging me inside. The door slammed, sealing the darkness. What unfolded next was chaos. Julian's voice, a torrent of threats alternating with attempts to gaslight me, to convince me I was hysterical. Clara huddled in a corner, shielding Lily, both shaking uncontrollably. In a surge of adrenaline, I wrenched free, scrambling into their guest room, slamming and locking the door. My phone blessedly tucked into my robe pocket. The 911 dispatcher's calm voice was an anchor. Help was en route. Hold on. But Julian was there, pounding, bellowing. The wood began to splinter. So I wait, trapped between prayer and panic. Distant sirens swell into flashing red and blue lights, painting the walls through the window. Will they reach me? The door splinters, groans, then bursts inward with a final, sickening crack. Julian fills the doorway, eyes feral, a glint of steel, a kitchen knife gripped in his hand. Time distorts, stretching impossibly. The blade arcs downward. Clara screams somewhere deeper in the house. Then, abruptly, new voices erupt. Sharp commands. Police! Freeze! Julian's face contorts, rage dissolving into stunned confusion. The knife falls, clattering harmlessly. He crumples under the weight of officers swarming him. The ensuing hours are a disorienting montage. Questions asked, answers given numbly. Clara and Lily, swaddled in blankets, guided towards waiting paramedics. Julian, cuffed, thrust into a patrol car, his eyes finding mine through the rear window, burning with cold hatred. As dawn bruised the sky, a police officer with kind eyes approached me. "You did the right thing," she offered gently. "You likely saved their lives tonight." But watching Clara and Lily disappear down the street, contemplating the months of unease I'd ignored, I felt no heroism, only the sharp sting of regret for my delay. The officer seemed to read my thoughts. "Hey," she said softly, "don't beat yourself up. You acted when it counted most." I managed a nod, though the guilt remained, a leaden weight. Walking back to the quiet solitude of my own house, I knew the street's placid facade was irrevocably cracked. Later, fragments of the Holloway's past surfaced. Whispers of other towns, other hasty departures, a pattern of fear left in their wake. How many others, I wondered, had noticed the signs and chosen silence? Clara and Lily never returned. Word filtered back they were with her sister, states away. I hope they find sanctuary, a path toward healing. The house next door now stands vacant, a hollow monument to the secrets it harbored. And each night the darkness seems deeper, the silence behind neighboring windows more profound. I find myself listening, wondering about the hidden dramas unfolding behind closed doors, and questioning whether, faced with another scream in the night, I would find the courage to answer sooner.